Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Watch and Listen podcast. This is a podcast all about watches that I do with my friend Cameron Weiss, the master watchmaker and CEO of the Weiss Watch Company, making watches from scratch, including the movements right here in Los Angeles. The Watch and Listen podcast is brought to you by Crown & Caliber. Crown & Caliber is the number one place to buy a secondhand luxury watch on the internet. And listen, if you've ever bought a watch over the internet before, or if you've ever looked at Reddit's watches section, half the questions are, is this a safe place to buy a watch? Is this a safe place to buy a watch? Where should I buy a watch from? Crown & Caliber solves this problem for you because you don't really want to buy a watch from a third party, just like a dude on the street. You know what I mean? You never know what you're going to get. There's a lot of fakery going around out there. Crown & Caliber offers the legit watches with limited mechanical warranties. What you see is what you get on their website. You're looking at the exact watch you're buying. They have a team of in-house watchmakers and technicians to make sure the watch that you buy is operating perfectly. They want you to be happy with your watch. They'll also take in your trade or buy your watch from you if you want to trade up, trade out, or just get out. Use code WL150, that's code WL150, and get $150 off your first watch purchase at Crown & Caliber, courtesy of your friends at the Watch and Listen podcast. Just hit up crownandcaliber.com and use code WL150 for 15% off. We are also brought to you by Beeline Coffee. Listen to this. Ready? Drinking it right now. Beeline is delicious. Micro batch roasts from coffees from the finest corners of the globe, whether it's Central America, Ethiopia, other parts of Africa, the islands, man. You know, they've got the best coffee I've really ever tasted. Whenever I try some other coffee, if I'm out and about and I drink some other coffee that's equally high-end, typically I'm disappointed compared to the Beeline. I've even got my own roast. The Roasted Tire 3.0 is in their store now. Use code CHRONO, that's CHRONO, code CHRONO, will get you 15% off your entire order at BeelineCoffee.com. Code CHRONO for 15% off your entire order at BeelineCoffee.com. Okay, folks, on this episode of Watch and Listen, we are exploring the Speedmaster. Now, we have discussed Speedmasters in many other episodes, including chronographs and the history of Omega. This episode is all Speedmasters, and that's because the Speedmaster name applies to a lot of different watches, even more so than, say, the Rolex Submariner name. The only name that applies to more watches than the Speedmaster name is, like, the G-Shock name, but that's like a whole brand. This is like one model line that has a lot of variation in it. So we're going to go in a little more detail. I'm going to try not get lost. And here it is, the overview of the Omega Speedmaster. What's up, guys? Watch and Listen podcast. Cameron and I here doing a double shift. 2 podcasts in a row. We just kicked Spike Ferriston out the building, and now we put away the tutors, and we're talking about Speedmasters. The Omega Speedmaster. Cameron Weiss. What's happening, man?
I had a baby, so I'm a little like scatterbrained at this point. But right.
All you're thinking about is that baby?
Where's that baby and work piling up?
Why is Genevieve not on your Instagram? Where? Oh, yeah, there's a baby. Found a baby.
Check out Cameron M. Weiss on Instagram.
For more for all your baby pictures?
Yeah, for all your baby pictures. I got a good one of her on there with her new watch collection.
Does she have a watch collection already?
She does.
Baller. That's baller. Buy a watch from Cameron. Support his baby making habits. You can support my bar going habits and his baby making habits in the same place by buying a watch from Cameron. I get no cuts, unfortunately. Today, it's going to be Speedmasters, the official watch of nerds.
It's
the original racing watch, really.
could be the original racing watch, possibly. It's definitely maximum nerd watch. I in doing research for this particular show, I went down a rabbit hole of nerdery and spaceness. Just their reference numbers.
I hate Omega reference numbers. When they switch to this new system,
They're like Dewey Decimals.
Horrible. Yeah.
It's like 100.12, 0.04, 0.65, .R, 0.12. And it's like, what does that mean? That means you have the standard one.
Yeah.
That means you have the regular one.
They started like adding everything up, and it's like, well, you have the 1.0623 case, and you have the .2368 dial, so then you have the 1.063237.839.
Yeah.
And it's the dumbest system, I think. But for a big company, I guess it helps them out.
I guess, yeah. And there is a certain subset of watch people that love reference numbers. And there are. I cannot possibly make a show that caters to them. Because I tried for like 15 minutes when doing research for this show to actually follow the reference numbers. And except for the very first Speedmaster, which is the 2915, back when they had a normal reference number. Except for that, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
I can't.
The 2915 and the 2998.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. Everything else is just a bunch of copycats that don't really. Well, it's not the same watch. I think
that's not being nice, is it?
I think it's a similar watch with a very different number.
Yeah. All right. We'll see, because we have a pile of them sitting on the table.
Yeah.
But to accentuate my point, look, I did have to print out this handy reference guide of what the reference numbers actually mean, because they suck.
And I think on there you've only got the true, like,
only the vintage.
Yeah.
The modern
only
ones.
the real manual wind.
Yeah. So pretty much this is going to be an episode on Speedmasters that mostly doesn't use reference numbers because they're annoying.
Yeah.
We're going to go by names and not reference numbers. We begin where most interesting Omega stories begin in 1957 with the introduction of the Speedmaster. The 2915 Speedmaster. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to use reference numbers. Then that's where I just go straight to.
Yeah.
It looks like no other Speedmaster really since, right, Cameron?
Yeah, except for all the reissues they've done over the years.
Stop it with the reissues. No.
But so this watch, if you're trying to figure out what the true Speedmaster kind of ethos was from the very beginning, you're going to find broad arrow hands like these. You're also going to find on your second register, you're going to have these pointed kind of arrow hands.
Uh-huh.
You're also going to...
As opposed to slim sticks.
They changed to these baton, hour, minute hands, which are just the really skinny, straight sticks.
Yeah.
And then for your sub-seconds and your chronograph registers, you're also going to have just stick hands. And then for your center chronograph second hand, you're going to have this, like... what do they call it? They don't call it an arrow. They call it a spear with a flat bottom. They went to very basic straight hands as opposed to these more elaborate hand sets that they used at the beginning, which was broad arrow. And then you had your alpha hands.
Well, hold on. You don't get too far ahead of ourselves.
Well, that was the start was the broad arrow.
Start
and the
was
alpha
the broad
hands.
arrow and the alpha hands.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And then you'd have your steel bezel. No black bezels to start.
Okay,
It was
got
the
it.
steel bezels.
And the Hazelite crystal, which is an acrylic crystal that's basically plastic that you can polish it out, right, to a certain point.
Yeah.
And regular mineral glass came later. So the movement of this lovely piece was the caliber 321 Omega movement, which is... A lot of collectors say, you don't have a real Speedmaster unless you have this 321 manual wind chronograph movement, which didn't even originate from Omega. This was from Lemania.
Right. So you have the guys that say that the original should be 321, just because that was what it started out with, and that's cool. But from a whole different standpoint, this movement. you're going to find this movement in Vacheron Constantin, in current day Vacheron Constantin watches, current day Patek Philippe watches. This is an amazing movement. It's the CH27 from Lemania. It was developed in partnership with multiple brands to be a manual wind chronograph. You have your column wheel, which is the little castle-looking wheel. The Genevan brands like Patek, they will cover that so you won't see it. It's just a flat, high-polished circle because there's no easy way to finish those parts, to decorate them. But this movement is an extremely high-grade movement. Omega was one of the companies that didn't finish it as nicely as Patek and Vacheron, but it's still, you're starting from the base of something really high.
Yeah.
Very high watchmaking, which in a watch of this price, or they used to be relatively inexpensive, it was pretty amazing. You can also find a $60,000 Vacheron today in the boutique that has this movement, essentially, just decorated by Vacheron.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
So this movement is not just significant for those reasons. It's also significant because if we jump ahead 60 years to about a week ago, Omega announced that they would start making this movement again.
Yeah.
Which is pretty gangster. And the Speedmaster freaks are being freaks about it. They are really excited.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, because now you can get that amazing movement in a new watch. It'll be more expensive than these were originally, but it won't be anywhere near what a Vacheron or a Patek costs.
And that's that's really a better idea than coming up with just a new column wheel chronograph movement?
For Omega, yes. I think if Omega was to come up with a new column wheel chronograph,
like, I don't get it. Like, the only way I can associate this is like Harley Davidson, where their customers actually want them to make their products. Like, if they sold a brand new 1968 Harley Davidson right now, like, customers would like line up to buy that, you know?
And I think that's the same kind of thing that they're going for. I don't think they're going to make huge numbers with these. And the reason they're not is because the architecture of this movement is not, it's not the type of movement that lends itself to the new production methods. So they're going to have to produce a lot of these parts in old ways as opposed to new ways.
Are they going to like increase the power reserve or anything like that? Or just leave it as it was?
They shouldn't change anything like that. If they change the power reserve, and it would, the only way you could do that would be by messing with the balance wheel and messing with the gear ratios, and it wouldn't be the same. I think that would defeat the whole purpose.
You couldn't swap it out for a more modern material in a certain way, like if your mainspring or whatever was a different material or whatever.
They'll definitely have a different material for the mainspring or for the hairspring. Yeah, but the rest of it should remain relatively the same.
All right.
The interesting thing is Lemania still produces these movements. So it's not that groundbreaking because Lemania produces them. It's just that Swatch Group took over Lemania. Lemania stopped selling them to other brands, and now Lemania kind of disappeared, and you have a company within the Swatch Group that has negotiated to have that produced for them in a way that makes sense for that brand, as opposed to producing for Patek or Vacheron.
Got it.
So I don't think it's that groundbreaking, but what's groundbreaking is that it'll be available at a lower price, a really high-grade movement at a lower price in probably the largest numbers it's ever been produced.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Fucking cool. So there's that. We just jumped ahead 50 years. Now we're going to go back 50 years to 1959, where there were some small updates to the Speedmaster. They changed the hands, they changed the dial a little bit, they changed a couple things. Fundamentally the same thing, but it was updated. And then in 1962, Wally Schirra and Gordon Cooper, who were NASA astronauts, wore their own personal Speedmasters in space, which was not an endorsement. They weren't given them. It wasn't an official mission thing. They just wore them in space, and then they went to NASA afterwards and they said, you know, watches are pretty important up there. We should really all be using the same one. and NASA should work with or find a way to choose a watch that works in space, as well as to issue it to us so we all have the same thing, basically. In 1964, NASA decided to research and find a watch that qualifies. In the case of Hamilton, which was an American company, they worked directly with them. In the case of Longines, Omega, and Rolex, they worked with the North American distributors to get watches. They did not actually work with Omega or Rolex corporate, and that's why they were a little surprised later when they saw this picture, which is astronaut Ed White doing America's first spacewalk, wearing an Omega Speedmaster velcroed around the wrist of his spacesuit. Omega was like, is that a Speedmaster? But in Swiss. And yeah, they didn't actually know this was going on. Now, of course, now is the part where we have to read off the qualifications for space again. Didn't we do this once before?
Probably.
In the Omega episode. So the actual test, right, that NASA wanted the watch to pass in order to be qualified for space flight. So it's 11 items. I'll go through them pretty quickly. 48 hours at 160 Fahrenheit, followed by 30 minutes at 200 Fahrenheit. So high temperature and then very high temperature for 48 and a half hours. Low temperature, 4 hours at a temperature of 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperature pressure, 15 cycles of heating to 160 Fahrenheit for 45 minutes, followed by cooling to 0 Fahrenheit for 45 minutes at 10 to 6 atmospheres. Well, I don't know if that's a typo. It might be 10 to the minus 6th atmospheres. Basically space, I think, in a vacuum. I think it's a vacuum because it's space, right? It's low pressure.
10 to the negative 6?
No? I think that could possibly be the amount of atmosphere there is in space, I think. Relative humidity, which is 240 hours at temperatures varying between 70 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit in 95% humidity, so like sweltering death jungle.
Yeah.
48 hours in an atmosphere of 100% oxygen at a pressure of 0.35 atmospheres, which I think is pretty much what it's like inside a spacecraft. High volume of oxygen, a third of atmosphere pressure, yep. 6 shocks of 40 Gs each, 11 milliseconds in duration in 6 different directions. So that sounds like it has to pretty much be like hit by a hammer from all sides, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much. It has to accelerate from 1 G to 7.25 G within 336 seconds along an axis parallel to the spacecraft axis. So it has to survive a launch.
Yeah.
Right? It has to survive 90 minutes in a vacuum of 10 to the minus 6th atmospheres at 160 degrees and then 30 minutes at 200 degrees. So high temp in space. And then high pressure, 1.6 atmospheres for 1 hour. 3 cycles of 30 minutes vibration from 5 to 200 hertz. And then 130 decibels over a frequency range of 40 to 10,000 hertz for 30 minutes. So pretty stringent requirements for a mechanical thing to keep, working, right?
Yeah.
I mean, extreme high temperatures, extreme low temperatures, high and low pressures, G forces, G shocks. That's quite a pretty impressive achievement.
Yeah.
I don't remember how far off the Rolexes were, but it wasn't enough that the average human would give a shit. It was only like for actual space syncing to other watches and space travel.
Yeah, I don't know if there was any like epic fails except for a few brands not delivering watches.
Yeah, I think it was Waltham submitted a military pocket watch, and they were just like, nah. and they just didn't.
Well, we don't do pocket watches.
Yeah, they didn't fuck with that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because
Oh,
they
not
had,
Waltham. I'm sorry. Hamilton was DQ'd for sending a pocket watch.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, well, they had pocket watches that they had built in such a way that were designed for the Air Force,
Right.
and could handle all these extra movements and G's in all different directions and shocks and what have you, temperature, all these special things. They even had cases that you would store them in during certain flight operations and stuff like that.
So the watch that actually landed on the moon, right? The one that really matters. I'm again not going to dwell on reference numbers, but it's the ST105.012. Yuck.
Which is a 2998 with a different number,
Yeah,
basically.
pretty much.
Yeah, when they got their new numbering system that sucks.
Yeah, this is it. It had the 3-2-1 movement, the manually wound chronograph. It has these. What do they call these hands again, Cameron?
These
baton
ones are the
hand.
baton hands, and then you've got your thin little, like the straight chronograph hour and minute hands, and then your second hand, and then you've got that spear for the central chronograph second hand with the flat back on it.
Yeah, good looking watch. But they definitely de-stylized it a bit, didn't they? From the broad arrows. Do you think the broad arrows were just covering up too much of the chronograph register?
It could be. When they started, they had two really nice handsets, I thought. And personally, I think this is the least attractive set of the hands. So they had two sets when they started, then they had introduced a third set. And I personally like the other sets of hands that they had previously.
Yeah.
But they also had the steel bezels, which I guess were not as readable as the aluminum bezels that were black with the silver numbers. But a big thing, so you see these lugs here? These are not the straight lugs.
Yeah. They're what, faceted, or what do you want to call that?
Yeah, twisted or faceted, really. So you started with the straight lugs, and we have an example here on the reissue of the broad arrow.
Oh.
So if you look here at the lugs,
Sorry, let me just zoom in appropriately.
they're straight edges.
Yeah.
If you look at later Speedmasters here, you've got that twisted facet
Yeah.
on the inside. Right in there.
Right.
So
right
that
where
was a
the,
design
where the
change.
case meets the bracelet.
Yeah, that design change came. You've also got another thing in here, crown guards.
Oh yeah.
So you have your straight edge, which are the old ones.
Uh-huh.
Then you've got your asymmetric cases, where they actually have more material on this side, so that you have your twisted lug.
Yeah, they
and
don't
it
actually
comes out.
sink the pushers into the crown. They actually just into the case. They beef up one side
Exactly.
of the
They
case.
beefed up one side of the case
Yeah.
so that they could guard the pushers and the crowns. And at that time, the pushers actually also enlarged in size. They went from a 4 millimeter diameter to a 5 millimeter diameter. So you have like a little more weight on that one side of the watch,
Right.
which is why they call it the asymmetrical case.
And what we're looking at here is a Speedmaster 57 reissue on the left. Which
These
is
are both reissues.
They're both reissues.
We don't have any of the pre-moon stuff.
Right.
But,
57 at Crown and Caliber is my favorite of the non-super special ones, $5,600. And the one on the right is actually the patch 50th anniversary, $5,000. It's got that little logo, which is like gold horse or something, instead of the Omega.
The hippocampus, right?
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah. What, do you know the definition? What that logo signifies?
It's like the seahorse or whatever,
yeah.
right? I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, but I just know that they use that since the beginning on their Speedmasters.
So where were we? Right. So the ST 105.012, except for that very first Speedmaster, this is the most collectible one because this is the one that went to the moon. Right.
Yeah. Really anything with the 321 movement. Mm-hmm. The next was the 861 movement.
Yeah, that's where I was getting
Which
which is they changed movements to the 861.
Yeah.
Which, Cameron, give us the significance of the 861.
So the 861 is a little bit easier to produce. Again, Lemania caliber. So it's 321 is based on the CH27. It has a column wheel for the chronograph.
Is this 861? Yes. Right.
Okay, yes. So this one is the 861. So you replace that column wheel, which looks like the little castle with the pillars on it,
Right.
with a cam. So you have multiple cams on one screw. That's how your start-stop
So
reset.
you have a very short cam shaft, basically?
Basically, that cam
That
moves
screw is a
around
cam-
the screw.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a shoulder.
Yeah.
This is easier to produce. The design for all of the levers is much simpler with the cam than it is with the castle wheel, the column wheel, just because you're actually rotating that column wheel all the way around and pulling it and pushing it in different ways. So it's easier to produce this one in larger numbers.
Because these cams only go one way? Is that what? Because it's all...
It's just a back and forth,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Whereas the column wheel rotates all the way around, so
it.
each lever has multiple movements that it's making. It's more like an arm that you have a wrist and an elbow. So it's much more complex to make the previous movement. This one's simpler. So the 861, they increased the beat rate 21.6 instead of 18.8. You have the cam operated chronograph, and you've got this copper color on the movement bridges. Later, there's the 1861, which is still produced today, and it goes rhodium colored. But here, you've also got this little blocking mechanism right here. In the 861, it should be Delrin. It's like a white plastic-looking part.
I had bushings made out of that in my car.
Yeah, so Delrin is a high-tech kind of plastic. Doesn't absorb any moisture, so it won't change dimensionally. But it's used to actually hold that center second for the chronograph at zero position. When your
Okay.
chronograph's not running, you don't want to move your hand and have that thing flopping around.
Of course.
So that's a braking mechanism. And on the 861, it should be white plastic. However, if you ever sent yours in for service, they switched it out to metal because they stopped producing the plastic one.
Oh.
So you'll see them with all different types, but the original ones were white plastic, Delrin. And then the later ones would be rhodium plated, and then you'll have a steel part there, high polished.
Neat.
But basically the same movement, just they added a 1 in the front.
And yet, the 321 is the much more valuable one to have.
Yeah, well, think about it. You could either have this, which is...
Would you
this,
know that?
this was
Well,
shared
let me
with
ask
like
you a
Tag
question.
Heuer.
If you're just holding the watch and watching it move and using the chronograph, can you tell?
If you've held a lot of watches,
Yeah.
yes, because you have a slower beat rate in the 321, and you're also going to feel the difference in the chronograph pushers because of the way the column wheel operates,
Right.
as opposed to the cam. But what you'll see is the second hand on the chronograph, when you operate it, it'll make fewer jumps
Right.
when you have a faster beat rate.
Right. It looks smoother the faster the
Yeah,
beat rate.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it'll be a little rougher on the 321.
Oh, gotcha. All right,
Yeah.
cool. So we're in space. Those are the where was I? Yeah, the one from the 60s. Where am I? That one is the most valuable to collectors besides the broad arrow. Now astronauts are all flying around with Speedmasters, and Omega decides this space thing is pretty good for us. Why don't we try to take some advice from our astronauts, and instead of just them taking our normal Speedmaster into space, why don't we make a space watch? That will be cool, right? So they work on something called the Alaska Project, which has nothing to do with Alaska and everything to do with going in space. And they take their Speedmaster movement, they improve it with some different lubricants and a couple different materials, although it's pretty much the same. They then build a sort of dome-like case out of titanium, which the image I'm showing right now actually doesn't show because the titanium case of the watch is inside this red anodized aluminum housing that was on the outside of the watch to protect it even more from shock and temperature and that kind of stuff. So they were produced sort of in very small numbers like this, and then NASA went, you know what, the regular Speedmaster's fine.
Yeah, I think they made like 3 or 4 prototypes of the Alaska project.
I read 5, but
Okay, yeah,
not
something
not
low.
very many. I mean, very, very few made.
Yeah.
And then
And the significance of the white dial was a special coating. I forget what the coating was. Some something heat resistant, kind of heat shielding material. That's why they went to the white dial.
well, I just read that it was white because white was the most reflective color, and it would be easiest to see. Because in theory, that was for the astronauts who were going around to the dark side of the moon, and it was in theory that was what it would be for in very darkness. So white was just brighter than black. And then the red housing was it was anodized aluminum, but red itself, the red anodization process, protected from some types of radiation. It wasn't red
interesting.
for like safety reasons.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was red because that color possessed some sort of properties. Yeah, and then the pushers would go through the case and operate the chronograph from the outside. So they lost a bunch of money doing this because NASA didn't want it. And so what do they do from there? They go, well, how do we roll some of these innovations into a new line of watches? Oh, no. And then they created the Speedmaster Mark II, and then the Mark III and the Mark IV, also known as the 70s Speedmasters. They looked a little different. Same movement, right? 821.
Yeah, they started to experiment with movements as well. They went to like their 300 hertz movements in some of them, but yeah, at this time, same. Not on this particular one that's showing here. This one has it's a newer reissue with a coaxial. But
shit! I pulled the wrong picture. I'm sorry.
But that
It's not
general
supposed to be.
shape, yeah.
I also have the Mark III here.
There we go.
So this Mark III was Omega's first automatic chronograph. It was. I apologize if you heard what just happened there with my phone connecting to my computer. That sucked. The Mark III in this domed case here. This was from the Alaska project, and it was designed in a dome fashion like this, so that stuff wouldn't get as snagged on the case. So it was smoother. So things like straps or strings or cords would just slide over it.
Yeah. But it's funny because they go to the automatic, which is not something that would work in space.
Yeah.
You have a weight inside the watch and it becomes weightless.
Well, I guess they wanted to figure. Oh, that's funny. I didn't know about that.
It basically turns back into a manual wind watch.
Wait, no, that's not true because
it will still spin.
It will still spin, but without the aid of gravity, it won't spin in the way the watchmaker intended, right?
Yeah, well, the amount of weight is not going to be able to overpower the resistance of the spring, basically.
Right.
Because it's not free spinning. If it was free spinning, it would be fine. But it's actually winding up the mainspring. So the tension in that gear train is too great for the weight to overcome when you're in outer space. Most people will not have that issue. They're here on Earth, and it'll be fine. But that's why the original watches that were manual wind were selected for that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you've got your Mark III, which is your war helmet style case, and then there was a Mark IV, very limited edition, apparently only released in Germany, which I've never actually even seen one of these before, but it's pretty cool. Also, an automatic chronograph. Let's see, 1969, we get the Flightmaster, which there is a lot to unpack in this watch. There are 5 buttons or 5 crowns or pushers, and there are 7 hands on the Flightmaster. Can you explain this watch, Cameron?
So I guess you've got multiple times in here. You got a 24-hour dial here.
Yep.
For day night.
Yep.
Except they're using green and black. And then you've got another time zone on this
got
blue
a
hand
GMT
over here.
hand. So you've got a GMT hand and a 24-hour dial.
Yeah.
And they operate. They're not the same thing. A GMT hand is typically a 24-hour clock. You've got 2 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got your chronograph, which is the triangular orange hands is your chronograph over there. And then you also have an internal bezel in here.
Crazy, right?
Yeah. So and it's a 60-minute internal rotating bezel. So there's a lot going on, many layers to that dial, and I think the way they did their like minute markings is really interesting. Between the minute markings, they also have these hash marks, but they're like in an offset checkered pattern.
Yeah. It gives you like a bit of a checkered flag thing, but it actually also helps you count fractions of a second on your big chronograph hand, right?
Yeah. It's just something about it is very like Sputnik.
Yeah. And there's a lot of colors happening here. There's like 5 different colors in the dial. It's a pretty complicated thing and busy thing to look at. The significance of the watch culturally is that these were kind of known as the watches worn by Concorde pilots. Omega in the prototype Concordes constructed a lot of their instruments on the dash of the planes, and the pilots began wearing Flightmasters. So, yay. Then in, 1970, 1970 becomes significant because Mr. Jack Swigert of Apollo 13, portrayed by Bill Paxton, I believe, in the movie Apollo 13, used his Speedmaster, which was one of these. Right? Yeah, that one. Wasn't it that ish? Or that's a
Which
reissue.
one did he use?
He had it was the 10512, 105.012.
Oh, we don't have any of those.
We don't, but
no,
it looked like that.
It would look like this one.
It looked like that one.
Yeah.
There you go. He used that to burn exactly 14 seconds of fuel, which to me is a lot more impressive for the human than the than the watch.
Yeah.
The watch should be able to run for 14 seconds accurately. How accurate is that human that's been freezing his ass off
Right?
in a fucking tin can for 3 days
Yeah.
or whatever it was?
Yeah.
I think the performance of the human is more impressive than the performance of the watch. But it is that 14-second burn and the timing of it by that Omega watch that earned Omega the Silver Snoopy Award from NASA. And not just the Snoopy Award, I'm sorry. The Snoopy Award is an award given by NASA to civilians, ancillary
contractors.
Yeah, contractors.
Yeah.
When their equipment goes, above and beyond, let's call it the Call of Duty in space, which gives us really awesome watches like this Omega Silver Snoopy, which is a modern Omega commemorating the Snoopy Award. This is the most expensive watch they sent us today. Used value $24,500. This is a watch that's like 14 grand new, and nobody can get them. And so this is a straight up flip. But it does have Snoopy on the back, which rules. It's like almost like a 3D art as well. And it does have the Snoopy on the 9 o'clock chronograph register. And have you ever seen one of these at night, Cam?
Does he glow?
He glows.
Oh, wow.
Snoopy glow. By far the coolest thing
That is
about
cool.
this watch. Hang on, I'll find it. Silver Snoopy Loom. By far the coolest thing about this watch is glowing Snoopy. Oh, hang on. This shit is fire. Here you go, folks. That is what it's all about. The
That is
application of the haloed loom around the black hour registers, and then a napping Snoopy.
And on the tachometer as well. That's nice.
It is rad. Adam Craniotis of Red Bar has one of these, and he will never, ever let it go. It's the only Speedmaster that I want to own right now, and they cost 50% more than a fucking Daytona at the moment. But that's the dopest shit ever. That, to me, is the hottest of the Speedmasters. Oh, by the way, there's now a modern Alaska project as well. It is completely different from the those big red things I was showing you before. It has a normal Speedmaster case. It has a normal Speedmaster movement, but it has the white dial, and it has the what do we call those? Broom hands? What are those hands called?
Yeah, I think of like a jet.
Oh yeah,
like
jet
from
plane
above.
Yeah,
kind
okay,
of.
yeah,
I
jet
don't
plane
know.
SR-71.
Yeah.
Looking,
Or it could be
hands.
like the pods that come back to Earth.
Oh
when
yeah,
you're coming from outer
maybe
space, right? The shape
the
of that on the tail,
capsules.
the
yeah,
capsule.
yeah. So this one is actually the second most expensive watch, even though this is like a special edition modern watch. It's not the one of the 5 Alaska
Yeah.
project. This is still 14 grand for this thing just to have a Speedmaster with a white dial, man. Although I guess it's one of the few where you can tell it apart from other Speedmasters from like across the room.
Yeah, a lot of the other little nuances are tiny.
Well, let's bring up 3 that have like the very little nuances, like that one, and that one are all. Here's how similar these can be.
Yeah. Like these look like the same watches to most people.
Like,
Let me get them all on the screen here.
bring them a little more to the left. Yeah, there you go. To me, like these are all basically the same watch, and from more than 6 inches away, they are the same watch. Same dial, same hands, similar case, same case, right? Almost the same case. Slightly different.
So the one in the center has your straight
smaller.
lugs.
Yeah.
You've got your straight lugs, and you can quickly see it, even if you can't see the little twisted facets.
Sorry, folks. I had to resize. I just did. I understand. I'm an idiot.
You can see that there's no asymmetrical case over there next to the crown guard area.
Right. So yeah, we're looking.
So
at this.
your pushers and your crown are exposed. And the reason they did this on this particular model in the center here is this is a 50th anniversary watch, and they specifically chose, if you look at the handset, you've got those are the Alpha hands. They're like a remake of the Alpha hands, which were one of the original handsets that didn't stick around for very long.
Yeah.
They also have the metal applied Omega logo,
Which
at
is hidden,
12 o'clock.
It's hidden by the minute hand at the moment, but the
so
different.
you can kind of see it sparkle a little bit in there,
Oh, there it is. Yeah, yeah.
and it does not say professional. It is the
Okay.
Omega Seamaster. This is pre-professional, a Speedmaster. Omega Speedmaster, pre-professional. So it has these little details that kind of go back to the original 2 watches.
Mm-hmm. And then the other 2?
The other 2 both have the newer shaped case. They have the baton hands. They've got... One has the printed Omega instead of the metal applied Omega at 12. The other one has the... What is it, the badge?
Yeah, the patch.
The patch?
Yeah. It's like a mission patch.
Exactly. All of these have the black tachometer scale, and they are all base 500, I believe.
That patch, by the way, compared to that professional, it's a $700 premium to get that patch. $4,300 versus $5 grand.
Interesting.
So now, in the spirit of NASA, we have to talk about the X33. The Speedmaster X33 is the watch that astronauts wear now, and man, does it suck.
So I was told by one of the guys that preps the watches for the astronauts.
Yeah.
He's a trainer for Omega, and he was saying that the ones that the astronauts wear, at least at this time when I knew him, have polished buttons.
Oh,
So you can tell if yours was an actual watch that was issued to NASA, sold to NASA or whatever, would have polished buttons instead of these brushed buttons.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to be a watch snob and have a really ugly watch, also can be yours for $2,700.
I think it has its place. I think a good quartz watch does have its place.
Refocus on.
I am not the biggest fan of the design. I think the way the buttons and all the like chunkiness of the bezel, I think is just
It screams early mid 90s for me.
it looks very nubby, like a knobby mutter off-road tire kind of is what I think of.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite at all. Then we've got how did we end up there? Oh yeah, the astronauts. And then we've got other limited editions. We've got the blue. Here, this one is it serves a purpose. Is that a coaxial? Is it display back or no?
This one is probably not a coaxial.
Okay. I haven't gotten there yet. I want to make sure. Occasionally you get a blue dial like this. You could also get the standard professional dial in blue, but this one has sort of a special panda kind of vibe happening. And then in 2011, the coaxial movement. Cameron's favorite movement, the George Daniels coaxial escapement. Oh, it's hot. That gave us a couple of the watches that we have here. Is this a coaxial?
This one's one of the older coaxials here.
Yeah.
So this was
This is a Speedmaster Racing.
one of the early coaxials. So this was back when they were modifying other movements and slipping the coaxial into it.
Oh, so this is pre-2011.
Yeah, so this one, if I'm correct, this should be a Frederick Piguet 1185
Okay.
that has had a coaxial escapement put into it. So really awesome movement with a coaxial escapement, but probably relatively inexpensive. How much is this one on the list?
Speedmaster Racing, $3,000.
Yeah, awesome deal.
Yeah?
Like an amazing deal for what you're getting with this watch. But
Huh.
it's those little things in the Speedmasters that you can find in that area where it's not the early stuff, because that's just so limited. I think the last early one that sold was $400,000 at Phillips Auctions.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're just so rare. But the later stuff has some really interesting quirks, but you have to know what to look for. And they were produced in enough volume that and people aren't like searching them out that much, that you can find some really cool gems in the collection if you know what you're looking for.
How interesting. Speaking of other collectibles, the Speedmaster 125, sort of a 70s vibe, big chunky case, reminds me of sort of the DiGiaro design school. These are pretty rare. They only made like 2,000 of them. It was the first automatic chronograph from Omega to get chronometer certified. So they were actually sent out and chronometer certified. So it's a milestone watch. They are pretty rare, and their case is this like two-piece case in which the dial and hands are sort of modular. They could be replaced or changed out easily, and then for that reason, they're actually faked quite a lot. But they're pretty dope if you're into the 70s vibe and you want a collector Speedmaster. The modern coaxial, wait, give us the dark side of the moon. We've got...
Now we go to super modern
and
with
this
the
one.
latest coaxial technology.
Yeah.
Latest, like, what is it, 9300 movement in there or whatever?
This is a gray side of the moon. There's also the dark side of the moon, which is fully black. It's a ceramic case, applied indices. I had a dark side of the moon. It was really neat. I didn't wear it at all, and I sold it to Crown and Caliber. But turn it over because the movement, it's got a display back, and the movement is actually quite pretty.
Yeah, these are gorgeous movements. All the newest technology that they're using in these movements, if you're not going for the regular Speedmaster professional moonwatch or whatever, these are gorgeous movements. You can see the balance wheel there. You have a black balance wheel. They're using silicon hairsprings and all these brand new anti-magnetic materials, so that you don't end up magnetizing your watch going through TSA checkpoints and things like that.
What's really neat about this movement, let me see how far I can zoom in, is it shows it. It's a little hard to read, but it actually shows in red all the parts are labeled. So it says like column wheel right here, and it says like, oh, it's probably behind the winding rotor, but it says like barrel and mainspring and like all these different little parts, so you can look at the watch. Can you hit focus again? Maybe there we go. You can see these little red things literally labeling what the stuff is, which is pretty cool. And then on the 57 reissue, which has the dial and hands from that 57, but the larger modern case, coaxial movement. Actually, I like this one a lot. I think this is a pretty good looking watch. I'm a fan of this guy. And it's got that very pretty display back with the coaxial movement.
Yeah, and these were ground up movements that they created with the coaxial inside of them. So
yeah,
totally new. So
that brings us, pretty much to today, to the modern era. That's a run through Speedmasters.
Yeah,
there's, with all these watches, and the Submariner is the same thing, although maybe not quite as nuanced. Like, it's there's such a difference between a $3,000 version of these and a $10,000 or $25,000 version of these, and yet there kind of isn't. It's only like 4 movements, 3 or 4 case designs, 3 or 4 hand designs.
Think of it like the 911.
Yeah, not a lot of change.
A 911, yeah, you could find a 911 or you could find a 912.
Yeah.
The 912 is going to cost you a lot less money. Most people are not going to know the difference. It looks the same.
Yeah, or a Carrera RS.
Yeah, exactly.
Looks a lot the same.
Add
as
a couple
as
letters
Carrera
there.
2. Yeah, no, a 91 Porsche 964 Carrera 2 is like a $45,000 car. A Carrera RS is a $300,000 car. And from more than a couple of feet away, they're exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So
you put the dot over the 90 on the tachometer scale. You put the base 1000 instead of base 500. You have the alpha hands, or you even have one of the unique pointed like ends on the instead of the flat bottom on a chronograph central second hand. You have a little triangle that kind of hangs down. Those little details make all the difference with this watch.
Yeah.
But it's only if you can prove that they are legit. There's a lot of them that have just been made over the years from parts that were either service parts made by Omega, or they're parts that were made by completely different companies, not Omega, just made to look like those ones because people liked the look of that hand or they liked the look of that dial. There's little steps on the dials. There's short indices on the chronograph registers. There's all these little nuances that change the value dramatically.
Well, what other thing is I think so interesting about the Speedmaster today is that Omega will sell you this Dark Side of the Moon with the display back and the beautiful movement. They'll sell you one that looks almost exactly like the one from 57. They'll sell you one in between that. You can still get the plastic crystal if you want it. They're happy to sell you a plastic crystalled watch. They really want to satisfy the person who is really about that, heritage and the space thing and all of that. And they're happy to find to keep making a watch for that person, which I think is neat. I would love to wear this silver Snoopy watch for like a week, but there's no way Crown and Caliber is going to let me.
No, you put a little scratch in that one, that's a problem.
Yeah, because this thing is mint.
Yeah.
It's so dope. This is the only one I actually think I want to own.
Yeah.
Do you want to own a Speedmaster?
I do, but all the Speedmasters I want to own are way outside of my reach.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not like a middle of the road collector one. There's the crazy ones, and then they're much, much, much more affordable ones.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for an affordable original kind of watch, you're probably looking at something with the 861 in it.
Yeah.
You could probably still find some of those at a reasonable price that have original parts and a slightly unique look to them, as opposed to some of the brand new models that are the same thing, but essentially you're going to spend more money and not have as much of the real history.
Yeah. Every time I keep looking at them, one day I'm going to find one that I want to own. But so far it's that one, but I'm not spending $25,000 for Snoopy on the dial.
Yeah. I'm excited to see when they do actually launch the watches with the new 321 caliber in it, what that's going to be like.
Yeah, that might be cool.
Yeah.
That might be cool.
I just want to know what kind of materials they're going to use and if they're actually going to stay true to
the old school.
To the old school.
That would be neat. I'd like to see. I mean, if it's not often that someone re-releases the Chevy 350.
Yeah.
We're starting to build Model Ts again.
Right?
Like
I think it would be
Did you know
cool.
the Volkswagen Beetle was the most successful car of all time? We're just going to keep building them just like that.
Why not build that 321 with a coaxial in it, with a true George Daniels coaxial in it?
I mean, could you? Would it still be a 321?
It wouldn't be a 321, but it would be a 321 that not only has all the history with and a better built movement than the 861 or 1861 as it is today. It's a better built movement, and you would have a historically significant recent development in chronology.
Yeah.
That's like a horological invention that is very important. Why not add that? I think that would be cool.
I'm guessing because they found a way to do this very cheaply.
Yeah.
That's what, if I had to guess, that would be it.
Well, like I said, the movement is still, the CH-27 is still in production. So it's not that crazy for them to start using that again as an Omega caliber.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Well, that's a broad history of the Speedmaster. All the watches featured on today's episode, by the time this episode goes live, will be for sale on Crown and Caliber's website. If you happen to buy one, by all means, let them know you got it from us and use code Chrono. That's not the right code. That's for Beeline Coffee. Use code WL150 and get $150 off any watch from Crown and Caliber. And all the tutors we featured on last week's episode as well for sale at crownandcaliber.com. All right, Cameron, anything to plug besides your baby and your watch company? That about it?
No, just
Plug
hop
the
on our
baby.
website and buy a watch.
And plug the baby.
Yeah, and find me on Instagram at Cameron M. Weiss. Follow Weiss Watch Company as well. See our watchmaking journeys and Genevieve grow up.
We'll go. Where's the baby?
There
There's the
she
baby.
is. There
Future
she is.
watch collector.
Yep,
Is that from Crown and Caliber?
that is.
Oh, that's
Crown and
great.
Caliber onesie.
Very cute. Onesies, merch. Me, I'm the Smoking Tire on Instagram. You know that already. You know how this goes. Smoking Tire Podcast, Smoking Tire on Instagram, Smoking Tire and everything. All right. We will see you guys next week. Thanks for sticking around. It's Watch and Listen. Have a good afternoon.